What up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's your guy. Something. Hit the keys. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the problem with mixing tutorials on YouTube. Make sure if you guys do like this content, though, you drop a whole elbow on that like button, hit subscribe and that notification bell so every time we bring you guys a new video, you can be the first to see. Well, no further delay, let's get right into this video, baby. Hit the key. All right, guys, so you've made a beat, you've recorded a verse over the beat, and now you want to figure out what it is that you need to do in order to make this sound good. So what did you do? You probably hopped on the internet and you probably looked up mixing tutorials, and then you found hundreds, potentially thousands of different tutorials to watch. So is there a problem with YouTube mixing tutorials? I guess the answer to that question is yes and no. Why am I saying that? It's because when you're watching a lot of these tutorials, there's a lot of things that we need to think about. So, you as a newer musician, you may only have, maybe a Rode or a mic like this, and you're taking mixing advice from somebody who has like a Neumann or that has like a Sphere DLX, and these mics are completely different. So when you're watching these videos, they're explaining to you, oh, how to mix, and it might be a lot easier to mix this microphone than it is to mix this microphone because they have different frequency responses. The microphones do different things. But this is going to hold true with everything in this music. So whether it's plugins, stuff like that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So as you're watching these tutorials, yes, it might be really easy for them to mix on this microphone. You might not have to do much EQ. You might not have to do much compression. You might not have to do much of anything because this microphone is good. Now with this microphone, you're going to have to do a lot of EQ, a lot of compression. You're going to have to do a lot of other stuff that they might not have explained to you in the mixing tutorial. And that's just one thing to think about, is like a lot of the people on YouTube or in this area, no knock to anybody who does tutorials or anything like that. I got much respect for everybody in this space. But a lot of the people who are doing mixing tutorials and stuff like that just have better equipment. You don't know if they have a preamp for this microphone. You don't know what kind of interface that they have for this microphone. So they might have a $1,500 interface. They might have a $1,000 preamp, and they might have a $1,500 mic. And now they're recording music with $5,000 worth of recording equipment, where you're using a $150 mic and a $100 preamp, and you're trying to figure out why your mix doesn't sound like their mix. That is a big thing, is that the equipment that they're using. Other things to also think about is, as we're watching these mixing tutorials, don't think of what they're saying as the end all be all, because if somebody's mixing their vocals, well, they might have like a high pitch register to where you have a low pitch register. So you're not going to be EQing and mixing your vocal like the person on the video is. So what I would say with a lot of mixing tutorials, what you should take away from them is the terminology that they're using. So if they're telling you, okay, if something's muddy, you need to cut it in these mid frequencies. Well, then yes, that's your starting place. So you need to understand, oh, okay, this is what muddy sounds like. So now I need to work into these frequencies and find the exact spot. So again, I'm not saying that mixing tutorials are bad. I'm just saying that they have different tools that you're using, and those tools are going to get different results. And so the same thing would go for like mixing a beat. So like, like let's say you've got this beat now and you want to mix the beat. And so now you've hopped on the internet and you're looking for guitar tutorials to figure out how to get your guitar to sound better. Well, one thing to think about is, like, let's say you're watching a tutorial and the person in the tutorial is using Omnisphere, and they're using a guitar from Omnisphere that sounds really good, but you've got a plasticky sounding guitar that's free that you just grabbed from somewhere on the internet. It doesn't matter how much mixing that you do, you're not going to be able to get your guitar to sound like this guitar in Omnisphere because they were recorded differently. They just have a completely different sound. And so that's something to think about too, as well, as you're trying to mix a piano. Like, you'll see a lot of tutorials will tell you to cut all frequencies under 500 hertz, but don't do that. Not every piano sounds the same. So some pianos are going to have a lot of mid frequencies, some are going to have a lot of lower frequencies. It just depends on whatever instrument that you're using on whether you should cut frequencies, and it depends on the mix, because depending on the 808, the kick that you use, all this other stuff that you use, it's going to change the way that that piano sounds in the mix. So again, watching these videos, everything's not do this on every single mix. Every mix should be treated differently. Another problem with mixing tutorials is that people will watch 30, 40 different engineers or YouTubers mixing tracks, and that can get kind of confusing because typically people don't always mix the same. So I don't want to say that there's a right, I don't want to say that there's a wrong way to mix. But if you're watching like 30 different people and they're all mixing different, you're never going to be able to get a good mixing strategy down because you're always going to think of what somebody else thinks is more important. So somebody else might EQ first, or somebody might compress first, or somebody might do something in a different order. And you're never going to be consistent with your mixes because you're trying to mix like a bunch of different people. So I don't really do mixing tutorials on YouTube. I know a lot of you guys know that because I don't want to teach somebody to mix something the wrong way. I know I did say there's not necessarily a right or wrong way, but I don't want you to go to a studio and be like, oh, something said to EQ like this, or oh, he said to compress something like that. Because a lot of the stuff I do, I taught myself, you know, like a lot of musicians do. So with a lot of these channels, when you're watching these people, just take it with a grain of salt because a lot of people have taught themselves how to mix and master and stuff like that. I mean, if we're gonna be real, I would put more focus on the actual producing of the music. So whether it's the beat making or whether it's the recording of the vocal or anything like that, because really mixing's only like 15% of the song. You know, like you gotta have an actual good song for it to blow up. So it doesn't matter how great a song is mixed. If the song doesn't sound good, if like the vocals aren't good, if like the vocal performance isn't good, if the beat's not catchy, it doesn't matter how great you mix that song, you can't make that song be a hit song. So one thing that I would say before you want to get really really into mixing, make sure that your production and your vocals are down. Another thing to think about too as you're comparing your mixes to other people's mixes, make sure all that your source data is good. So make sure that when you're recording, you have the best recording that you can possibly get. Make sure that you're recording in the best sounding room, because another thing that's going to be different from your mix to the person on YouTube's mix that you're listening to or something like that is they might have treatment in their room. So you see I have panels up in this room. Well, if you don't have panels in your room, you're not going to be able to get your record to sound as good as my record. So just little things like that are things that you should think of. Same with your instruments. Just make sure that you have good cables hooked up to your interface. Make sure that you're using the best sounds that you can. Because one thing that I can't stress enough is that I don't really even focus on the mix that much anymore. Once you've been making music for a long time, you kind of know what drum sounds are going to work. You know what pianos are going to work. You know what flutes are going to work. You know what guitars are going to work. And so you're not really necessarily doing this super intense mix. You're just kind of matching levels and volumes as you go. You're adding a little bit of reverb here or there. You're adding a little bit of EQ here and there, but all that comes with time. So instead of spending all this time watching these videos about how to mix, you should spend that time producing music, because the more music that you produce, the easier it's going to be for you to mix. That's like some of the realest information that I can ever give you. Focus that time on production, because learning how to mix will come with time. So I guess I'd say another piece of good advice that I can give for you guys is just stop watching mixing tutorials and start actually turning dials and mixing. I think that that's some of the greatest advice that you can get, because you can watch tutorials all day long, but if you're not understanding what turning the threshold on your compression is doing, or if you don't know what the ratio knobs are doing, if you're not actually putting it to test, then you're not going to get better at mixing. So I would definitely not tell you don't watch any mixing tutorials. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm absolutely not saying that mixing tutorials can't help you, because I've watched plenty of mixing tutorials and got some help. But what I'm saying is, instead of spending 5 hours today watching mixing tutorials, why don't you spend 5 hours actually mixing and trying to figure out what all those dials do? So understand what cutting EQ right here is going to do, understanding what attack and release on my compression are going to do, understanding what this de-esser is going to do. Spend the time actually bussing out your tracks So sending your vocal track to an insert, and then putting reverb and delay on that insert and sending it to another insert and putting EQ on there, and then like listening to the difference between what that sounds like versus putting reverb, delay, and everything on the same track. Just when you're watching these mixing tutorials, actually try to do yourself a favor and listen to what these people are doing. And then when you go to try it, and when you try these new mixing techniques that you're learning online, listen to what your old technique sounded like, and then listen to your new technique, and then honestly use whichever one that sounds better. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I got for you guys. I just wanted to put together a little video talking about mixing and stuff like that, because as important as we make mixing seem in this music, it's really not the most important thing. The quality of the music is the most important thing. You know, the way that the beat sounds, the way that the vocals sound, all that other stuff is important. The mixing is just the presentation. That's what the bow that we put on top to present it to everybody out there. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I got for you guys today. So make sure if you guys do like this content though, you drop a whole elbow on that like button, hit subscribe to that notification bell, so every time we bring you guys a new video, you can be the first to see. Appreciate you guys' time as always, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Some, hit the key.